Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey.
How's everybody's day today?
It was good.
We missed you.
Yeah. Today, we are going to talk about front suspension and lowering and
The effects
raising.
of lowering, yeah.
Yeah.
Like how
Or
rate-
raising.
Or raising.
Changing
Yeah.
ride height and its effect on suspension geometry.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the
that
front,
In
specifically.
the,
Why
okay,
in the
we're going to
front
do both,
specifically?
but we
Because-
think we need an episode for each. So
Okay.
we'll do front
Yeah, that's fine.
and we'll do rear next week. And
Yeah.
probably a synopsis.
Yeah, and then maybe a third kind of.
And then realize that we need another episode to,
yeah,
yeah.
how they affect each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we'll get into.
Right.
Well,
But first,
yeah, I had today off, so I did a little bit of cleaning around the house and clean the garage up a little bit, try to organize some of the detailing stuff, and washed all my microfibers that were disgusting, which is really satisfying.
Yeah.
Whenever,
No, I
like-
have some next
yeah.
to the wash machine, and
Yeah.
I almost put them in with my clothes, and I'm like,
Yeah.
actually, they're a little rough, so.
Yeah, I washed like my
don't
my
wanna ruin all
microfiber
my-
sponge, and like now it's spotless, and I'm like, yeah, it's great.
Get any good tips for keeping like the lint off of microfibers?
I keep them upstairs in like
No, like when you wash them.
dryer
Like
sheets.
you I guess you just have to wash them by themselves. See, I always try and throw them in with some other stuff because I feel stupid doing a load of laundry
Why?
for just microfibers. It's not that much. You know what I mean? And
Just
then
gotta
they,
have
get, then they get covered in fuzzies.
Enough of an arsenal where like you can stack them all up and then toss like a decent pile in.
Yeah, that's what I did. I washed,
Solution:
like,
buy more microfibers. Got it.
Yeah.
I've never tried to wash them. Like I just feel like I ruin them too much, and then they just slowly progress to like.
Yeah,
They
always end
do
up
actually
oil
come back
towels.
decent, and I mean, yeah, I wouldn't use them for
I
like
would
things
just-
that I want a microfiber
I would
for, but
feel-
they're shop towels that are reusable still.
I'd feel bad for my washing machine at the point that I
Fuck my
get
fuck my washing machine. I paid $100 for my washer and dryer, and it's not coming with me when I move. So yeah, fuck that thing.
Yeah. So I washed all
Wow.
that and kind of went through all the detailing stuff to make sure that I had everything I needed for, I don't know, my inventory of stuff that I normally have.
Nice. I do need to replenish just basic supplies. I'm running low on shop towels and brake clean and a
Yeah.
couple of those things. So
I didn't realize how gross the well, I had unloaded all the stuff from Euro District. Like I had a bunch of tools and parts with me when I went. And, like I had basically my entire toolbox in a bag,
just
so I had
didn't
to
bother
like.
putting it away.
Yeah. What else? Polo Parts doing half off engines on Saturday. Happy Halloween. There's a 3.6 and a Passat sitting there that I kind of want to go pull, and I might go pull.
Sounds like a spooky deal.
Spooky deal.
This guy.
Wookie noises. But yeah, I would probably just pull it just for either to swap it in El Corrado or to resell it. I mean,
I
for
support
half
you
off.
doing something with it. I don't support you pulling it just to have because that just sounds
Yeah.
awful.
Or to resell.
Yeah,
That's
well,
also
so
not worth
after
it.
doing some extensive research in full swaps for the Corrado specifically, there's quite a bit you actually need.
Well, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
well over like $6,000 worth of parts, and I'm kind of like, well, if I was gonna buy everything
Don't do that.
retail, which
yeah,
whatever,
that's not an option.
right? But yeah, I don't know. It'll end up in something if I do pull it, because I've been looking at caddies and whatnot also, which would
Okay.
be cool.
and whatnot.
But I don't know. I'm just gonna have to get there, I guess. If I get it, who cares if it sits for a few years and doesn't end up in anything right away?
Bring the
So,
Sawzall.
No, that is not okay.
Why?
You can't say that.
Why?
You have to do something like within 6 months with it,
All right.
not 3 years.
I know. Well, I haven't. I need to take the other engine off the engine stand that's been sitting there for 2 years.
Yeah, probably.
You got 6 months.
Yeah, should probably just sell that. But yeah, so I might go do that tomorrow, and do the typical pull apart run and do the good old look around, see if you can find any goodies.
Might
But-
do the venture out as well. I need
Yeah.
a couple things. So
But yeah, other than that, I didn't really do much today. I just kind of relaxed on my day off.
Nice.
That was nice.
The only
Wow.
unfortunate part about taking days off is, boy, they seem to fly by. Time goes so quickly.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
That's good.
I mean, I still got up
Glad
at
to
the
hear.
normal time.
Glad it's
and
different
I was
for
like, I tried to sleep in and
Yeah.
just wasn't happening at all. So
I refuse to do it. If I'm burning a vacation day, I'm up and doing stuff because I took it off to
Yeah.
do stuff.
But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I needed a day off. So
Yeah, understandable. Everybody does.
yep. What about you, Kev?
Well, Mike and I went to the final drift event last this past Sunday at pit race
Yep.
of the season. It was good. Broken axle. It was fun. There's a ton of people there. Totally different layout pit race though, which was pretty sweet. It was really long and sweepy, so it's fun to close out the season on a not breaking stuff too bad note, and then I don't know, E36 is in the lift spot now, so it's probably gonna get torn apart pretty soon.
Heck yeah.
What's your plans for
Potentially,
the winter?
Well, we talked about this last week, turbo things.
Yeah.
But I might be heading to Michigan Sunday to pick up E36 trailing arms, so I can put in E36 axle, M3 trailing arms and M3 axles.
What's the difference on those?
They bigger.
Okay.
They don't
Bigger
break as
how?
much.
Like just beefier altogether? Or
Well, you have to get the
around.
bigger.
okay.
You have to get the bigger trailing arms so you can run the bigger hubs, so you can get the
Okay.
bigger axles, so they don't fail. So, I don't know. We'll see. This guy's got 2 trailing arms, 2 axles, and stubs, and an M50 manifold for me for $400. So
Seems like a
not
fairly
terrible,
deal,
not
fairly good deal.
awesome, but
You're not going to pull them either, right? They're already
Right.
removed.
Yeah.
so
oh yeah, I mean that's
yeah.
That's good.
yeah. I feel like it's an okay deal. You're driving to Michigan, which is
Right.
For
That
M3
kinda
parts,
sucks,
it's a
but-
pretty good deal. I mean,
right.
yeah.
The go on car-part.com
Mhm.
and you find stuff, but it's everything that's listed for M3s is not close to here at all.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Other than that, just plywood. So much plywood.
It smells great in here. It smells like a
Yeah,
cabin.
we went from
in the
burnt
woods.
sugar from the insulation to nice fresh cut wood smell, and soon it'll be fresh paint smell.
So you've settled on painting.
Yeah, I should probably just do it
What color?
like gray,
Yeah. It makes
something
sense.
not too dark, something kind of reflective. Might do like a black stripe where the outlets are.
Oh, fancy.
You know,
Well, then you need new outlet covers.
no, I don't.
You can paint the outlet cover.
Contrast, it's fine. But each one of these, like the bottom parts weren't that bad, but the third board on the height or like up the wall and just around all the garage door things, just it takes so long to put up like 2 pieces because there's so many cuts and measuring and up and down the ladder. It's just the wood is a Pringle and not a flat thing. So
I see you added a couple more lights too, huh?
those have been there.
Have they?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I couldn't see really well underneath the wheel wells on the right side of the car.
Mhm.
So added some side lights. Once I get walls up, I'll drop those down some more and get some better side lighting going. But barn's almost there. You probably just heard the heater running for a little bit there.
Yep.
Thermostat's wired in. Exhaust is done.
Yeah, might kick
It's
on
good to
here
go.
again soon.
Sure
so,
it will.
Yeah.
But yeah, just plywood. A lot of plywood.
A lot of plywood.
Will?
Oh, let's see. What happened? 1 Speed 6 is done. Drove that around this week.
Drove it today.
And in true fixing something style, something else breaks. So while I pretty much sold it to my buddy, I have conveniently needed to drive it all week. So
To make sure that it's not broken.
well, that's another thing. But
Yeah.
so like, it's obviously been getting colder. Truck hasn't been wanting to start in the morning because of presumably glow plugs, and so I got around to diagnosing that earlier this week just to make sure, because like while they're not cheap or they're not expensive, they're not, I don't know, it's like $80 for the set of 8 of them, and it's like one of those things. It's stupid to throw away $80 if that's not the problem. So I finally got around to like pulling the harness and checking to make sure those were a problem before ordering them. So confirmed that's the problem. And so I started doing them last night in the cold rain and not well lit driveway. So I got 4 done last night. I'll do the other 4 either tonight or tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I had it in the shop earlier this week, and I had noticed a very potent diesel smell.
Oh.
And confirmed there was like one of these hard lines that's like a compression fitting, but not really, leaking pretty bad. So
I'm pretty sure I remember smelling that, and I thought it was mine when I was driving behind you the one day, and I guess I should have said something, but I just kind of waved it because I thought it was mine, and I was like, whatever.
I had acknowledged it before. It's just,
Yeah.
Sometimes diesel trucks just smell like diesel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
so they stink regardless, but this was worse.
Yeah, it seemed a little excessive. So yeah, that's late, but those O-rings will be delivered tomorrow, so that's also on my to-do list. Outside of that, I don't know. That's what I got. Oh, I did buy after last week's discussion. I bought a Mega Squirt. So
Oh.
yeah.
Oh,
So
nice.
I did that. Oddly enough, like I was looking, I wasn't really sure what I even wanted the standalone for. Like, because everything on standalone would be sweet, but
Right.
if I was going to pick one car to do it, I wasn't really sure what it was going to be first. But a really good deal popped up on a used Mega Square 3 Ultimate with an LS harness. So
Ooh,
I bought that for $650.
that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah,
aren't
it's a
they?
good-
Aren't
it's a
they?
really good deal.
Isn't the Mega Squirt usually like $1,000, $1,200?
That one's 15.
Yeah, that's the full optioned out everything.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Hell
So I'm still not sure if I'm going to put it in the Miata because the Holly option for that is $1,000 new
Right.
and really good for LS stuff. So what I'm thinking is I'll either keep the harness for that and then eventually just buy an additional Mega Squirt then so I can swap the Ultimate to something else and then just get like a basic for I don't know. I don't even know what I'm doing with it, but
Yeah,
it was a
it
good
doesn't
deal.
make
So
any sense,
yeah. So you bought it, but you don't know what you're doing with it yet?
exactly. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So yeah, I have that,
Yeah.
which is motivational at least. you
How's
know, so-
progress on the Miata?
I haven't touched it.
It's been cold.
It's taking some willpower to not touch it because I want to, but I'm trying to get other
Other things situated before it
projects
gets
that
really,
I'm not
yeah,
motivated to do done first. So,
That makes sense.
You broke the steering on your wagon, right?
No, I added a bunch of camber to the front end, and then I went to go realign it, and then one of the tie rods is seized, and so then I tried pretty hard with heat and hammers and chisels and stuff like that to do it on the car, and it just wasn't happening. So, I'll just replace everything at some point. I just don't want to spend money on stupid things,
Says person who buys Mega Squirt for a car. he
That's
doesn't
a
have use
fun
for it.
money spend, not a
I could have used that, Will.
maintenance money spend.
Yeah.
I'll sell it to you.
Okay. I'll give you $100 more than you paid.
No,
You keep the harness?
No.
I might. Maybe I need it. Maybe I need it for that 3.6
What's your
swap,
bid? What do you got?
Huh?
Yeah, for the engine that you have. Oh, you
right.
needed ECU for the engine that you don't have a car for.
Exactly.
And Will
yeah.
needs an engine for the ECU he doesn't have a car
Exactly.
for.
We can team up and maybe
Yeah.
we'll make something.
Have an engine run in the corner, still
Right.
in no car.
Yeah.
Quite the team.
Perfect.
Quite the team.
Engine stand, let's go.
Hell yeah.
Ironically, the guy said, because I asked him if he had modified the harness or anything like that, or if it was just like the uncut, Mega Squirt drop-on harness still. And he said, no, I used it to run an engine on the stand. And I was like, all right.
Hey, look, perfect. There we go. We got a team. I can pull that 3.6. We can make it run in the garage, and then we can slap it inside something and see if it works.
Slap it.
Just
Yeah.
slap
Just throw it in
in
there.
$6,000 slap, right, Dave?
I'll just slap it right in there.
That's all. That's
Yeah.
all I got.
Well, we all know what Mike Day did. Tell us your problems, Mike Day.
Oh, he didn't want to tell you.
No, he's going
Even though
to.
you
no,
knew.
it's fine.
We need a. I think
I just-
it might be time for a Mike Day
Intervention?
intervention.
Yeah.
He's
No.
he's squinty eye right now,
Disagree.
staring into
Everything's
the abyss.
fine. Everything's great.
Uh huh.
How many things work?
Some of them.
Half of them at least work.
Is it even
I think
half
it's
anymore?
half.
Because he just
No,
added one on
Well,
that doesn't
okay,
work.
half of them run.
We went through the number
Yeah.
the other day, and now it's 8. So 8 vehicles total.
8 cars.
Okay.
Yeah, well, let's,
Vehicles. Cars and
stick
trucks.
to registered 4-wheeled things.
But
8.
8.
8.
And how many work? Reliably? Not reliably. Road trip worthy.
Well, so back to our project management episode for the 5th time.
Less than 50%.
3? What do you got? Truck
Truck works great.
The Mark III works.
Unimog.
The Mark III works great. The
Okay,
Unimog
Mark
works
III.
great.
and Mach. Okay.
The Audi runs kinda.
No,
No.
I'm dismantling that. Hopefully that'll run this weekend. So I'm going to
Ooh,
start
did you
diving
get-
into that.
Okay, yeah.
My carb rebuild kits, I have confirmation, have arrived at my house today.
Cool.
Sick.
So depending on me cutting the intake apart tomorrow, I borrowed Will's ultrasonic cleaner to clean those, which I didn't even take out of the truck yesterday. But yeah, hopefully I'll start doing that tonight. But yeah, I did buy another thing, which I've been looking for a while. So I was looking for an X5, just an early E53. One popped up while we were drifting. Like my Facebook notifications got me there. It worked. So
Did you set up? Can you set up notifications for stuff like that on Marketplace?
Oh yeah, it's good.
I had no
Although
idea.
the price point does not work. You can't set it up that way.
The
I
most
don't care about the
frustrating-
price point.
I do.
I did care
Yeah,
about that.
that-
It showed me a
and
bunch of
the only
expensive
thing,
stuff.
I mean, the only thing I'd be looking for is like Corrado parts and like other stupid.
Do you also
Yeah,
have the
that's
issue
fine.
where when you get the notification, you click on it, it doesn't actually show you the thing
pops
that it
up and
notified
then
you
does it.
for?
So annoying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
glitch. But regardless, I bought the 2006 X5, which is the latest year of the E53. It's the newer. It's the V8 one, which both V8s were problematic. I don't know which one's worse. I think this one's worse.
I don't know
So
if it's
the-
the car's fault.
Is this the same V8 that has the cylinder sleeves in it that had issues because they were different types of metals?
No, that was eons ago.
Okay.
But so the earlier of this body style had Will's motor, which had timing chain issues and Vanos issues, and then like kind of leak coolant from everything in the middle.
Oof.
And then this is the N62, which is the replacement for it. They had this coolant tube that goes between the cylinder heads that you're supposed to like pull both heads to change. There's a solution to that now, but that was early on a big problem with them. They also kill valve stem seals,
Weird.
so they end up burning a ton of oil, which is kind of a big job. And they got a bunch of other kind of oddball weird issues. So
And then all the things that are wrong with yours, which are none of those. Well, you don't know
one
yet,
of them,
but maybe.
one of them, I think. Yeah. So I got it for $1,200.
It's pretty
And
good.
drove
Start
it
with
back.
that.
Yeah,
we-
that's-
we're gonna
that's
start
pretty
on the
decent.
high
we need,
point.
we need to know what the expectation is.
Start
here.
on
What's
yeah,
the
so-
mileage?
240.
It's not terrible.
It's just a baby.
Irrelevant at that price point.
Yeah, exactly.
no,
it could
yeah, it
have
really
400,000 or it could have 60. It's the same. It doesn't matter. But I drove it home from Worcester, so it was like, a half an hour ride back. Made it. The brakes essentially don't work. These are known for just this late motor. The brake booster gets killed because it's got a vacuum pump. For some reason, the engine makes plenty of vacuum, but it doesn't use it for that. I don't. Oh no, it's Valvetronic. That's why. So the engine doesn't make vacuum.
Yeah.
So they put a pump on the head, and it's pulling vacuum for that. But the pump starts leaking oil, which gets into the booster and kills the
Yeah.
seal. So then you need a pump and a booster,
That's annoying.
which are both expensive. So it needs both those. It has some monstrous oil leak from what turned out to be an oil line that someone tried to make not leak with a couple zip ties and a microfiber.
What?
Yeah, it's just a
gonna throw
microfiber.
that one
Yeah,
in the
'cause
washer.
Microfibers.
That'll be the
they-
test.
Microfibers
the-
don't leak at all.
It's a pre-sale fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Will and I were sitting in it the day after I bought it in the parking lot, kind of looking around with it running because it's cold out. And then I stepped out of it, and there's like a 1 foot diameter circle of oil. I'm like,
Yeah.
uh-oh. Order the line. The line, I have it. It's with a car right now. What else? The interior was absolutely disgusting. Like it's like a big smear of ice cream in the back seat and stuff.
Live
like,
ice cream.
So
Yes.
what you think is ice cream?
It was in the
There was
process-
a lot of it.
Yeah,
Did it taste like it?
there was like
It was a full gangbang's worth of ice cream then.
yeah, there was some rainbow in there. There was definitely
Oh, you got sprinkles?
yeah. There was other debris.
Boy, they're doing some weird stuff.
Yeah, some weird stuff. Yeah, earlier this week I spent like 4 hours cleaning it inside and out after work. Now it's really nice, inside at least. Outside still needs some work, but
Inside
It's
is nice.
clean.
It cleaned up good.
yeah, cleaned up all right. So yeah, otherwise it's relatively solid.
You're on your way to becoming an interior detailer.
Yeah.
You say that very unsure.
No, I mean this is the newest thing I've ever owned by quite a bit.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, no, yeah.
So I don't know. It's good.
What year is it?
If you don't count the
2006.
Helix.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's the same year as a Helix. So we're at a tie, but
Wow.
of car type things, it's the newest I've ever owned by 6 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's got all sorts of gizmos and gadgets I've never had before. Luxury.
Like a CD player.
I've had that before. I've never had a heated steering wheel before.
Ooh, that's cool.
Right?
To
I
be
feel
fair,
like that's
that's
a
not
failure
all
point,
new
though.
cars at all. so-
No, but nonetheless.
What? You said
fancy.
2006?
Yeah.
That was like new technology for them.
It's got
cutting-
heated
it's
rear
cutting
seats,
edge.
power
Yeah,
rear seats.
Yeah, that's like a lot of. Yeah. Sounds
Apparently those have Bluetooth too, which I didn't realize. It was like 04 to 06.
great. Ooh, early Bluetooth.
So I gotta poke at it.
6 Bluetooth?
Yeah, it's got to be awful.
Yeah.
But,
Wow.
Yeah, for the most part, they're just
I mean,
trash. There was in a lot of B7s too.
oh, really?
Oh yeah.
I don't know. But it's like,
Made,
huh,
but,
that's
like-
interesting.
It is? Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Whatever. So, something new. But, well, you know, it's kind of looking for some sort of vehicle that I don't have to touch quite as much, but it's still interesting.
So what about the 928? What's happening?
Have not touched that in the least.
Called out.
It's got too many other things going on.
Ooh, look
Yeah.
over here.
That's the
X5.
the lowest priority.
Ooh, X5.
If I can make the Audi run on carburetors, I might do the same to the 928.
carburetors.
I'm just so excited to
Yeah.
hear what it sounds like.
Me too.
It's
That's-
gonna
I'm
sound.
more excited
it's
about
gonna
the Audi.
sound sick. At least I would assume it
I
is
hope
going
so.
to.
Individual
Yeah.
5 carbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully it sounds cool.
With the 5-cylinder exhaust note is
Which I need to fix.
muy
But
bueno.
yeah.
The motivation won't be there unless it runs, all right?
Exactly. I bought all the exhaust stuff the start of
Yeah.
in like the spring,
Yeah.
and it kind of stopped running nice then.
Yeah, well,
It's leaky and sounds fluffy, but
fluffy.
Yeah.
Define fluffy. What
you
does
know that
mean?
like you know like an exhaust leak that doesn't
Oh,
have
yeah.
any tone to it. It's just kind of from underneath the car.
Yeah. Yep.
Fluffy.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's fluffy.
That's the exact noise it makes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Spot on.
It is pretty spot on. But yeah.
So
Interesting.
more junk.
More junk. You're running out of driveway space there, bud.
It's been gone.
It's gone.
Yeah, it's true.
Things
We're
are
running out of street
being
space.
stored not in his
I have nothing in the street.
driveway.
Just a couple. It's fine.
4.
That's all right. That don't matter. Hey, you can park. Hey, the Mark IV is gone. Feel free to park whatever
Half
you
of your
want.
vehicles are not on your property.
You can park whatever you want at my house in the street if you don't have room.
I suppose that's true.
And the fact that you still don't have space, there's a problem here.
I don't need this negativity. It's not what I'm here for. Working on a solution to that.
Yep.
Okay.
That's also been a priority of mine, but it hasn't come to fruition yet. So I don't know. We can manage.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
Yeah.
think
I've kind of been. I'm right there too. I'm realizing right now that I kind of don't want to just drive the wagon all winter. I kind of want something I can like mess around in. And so I've continued to search for Audi 90s and also B5 A4s, which is comparable to what I would want. But we'll see what happens.
There's a lot of whipped ones of those out there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That came up today.
Especially the 1.8s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's after we did the drift series with
Well-
Andy. Like it, after being around one, you start to notice how many there are out there. Like
Oh, there's
I
a
had been
ton.
pretty numb to it for a bit.
Yeah.
And then
And honestly, for what they are, they're pretty good. I mean, it'd be great winter beaters.
For the right price, I mean, yeah. I probably couldn't say no to one.
Yeah. And I would take either the 6-cylinder or the 1.8. Actually,
Junk.
is it?
Yeah.
but they're
Junk
pretty
why, though?
problem free. They just kind of suck. Like
Yeah,
they
it's
don't make any
junk.
power. They
Well,
sound
I
awful.
don't. I just want Quattro. I don't even care about anything else.
They're
I don't care if
hideous.
it's fast.
They're hideous. But I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
The 1ATs are not quite as reliable as they get the hype for, in my opinion. But
I mean, the
I
parts
don't
are
know.
still cheap
I
though
had
and
one for a
readily
long
available.
time and never had a problem. So.
yeah, but
Yeah,
you're
I
on
think
top
it depends on
of your shit,
the
so-
well, yeah, like I was going to say, it depends on the owner. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. The other ones I've seen get beaten into the ground and still work. 1ATs don't seem to be able to do that. So they're never going to get like the Jeep 4-liter reliability, stamp of approval here.
Yeah, the motor still runs, but half the car's gone.
So I'm not saying it's a bad option, but like I think it's overhyped for reliability.
I don't think it's a fair comparison either, though, because of the turb ski.
It's
There's
at
too much
least-
temptation.
It's at
I
least
know, I
not
know.
like one of those things where you're buying like a Volkswagen 2OT where they're like, oh yeah, the time and chain tensioners, like they're trash. Like you're gonna
There's
have problems
15
with it for
revisions.
sure. Like,
Right.
oh yeah, it eats rings also. It's
Yeah.
like it just doesn't have any like big thing
Burns
that's
oil,
always
oh,
wrong
yeah,
with it.
you're
It's a
screwed,
major issue.
That's true.
So,
Now
That's true.
we're talking about like early TSI, FSI, right?
no, we're talking like
Like all of them, all 2OTs.
pre 201AT. Well,
Oh,
you mean
yeah,
problem wise?
the
Yeah.
2OTs,
I don't
yeah.
like any of the you see how many B7s you see online now that
yeah,
said blown
pre
engine.
Oh, yeah.
2013,
You know,
two OTs were pretty bad.
it wasn't a B7 S4 with timing chain guide issues and oil consumption issues. It's
Yeah.
it's a 1AT. If you take care of it, it's gonna work.
Yeah, usually they're pretty stout for the most part. But yeah, well, front suspension,
So geometry
geometry.
and how changing height changes the geometry.
Changes everything.
Everything.
does.
All the things.
Not
Me
just
being
your,
me.
Not just your street cred.
Right.
Nope. That's all I care about, boys. You know it.
Well,
I know the clout goes up, but
Yeah.
So what do we start with? What are the terms? Bump steer, roll center.
right. So this isn't going to be strictly limited to. I feel like we're going to go into the rabbit hole of lowering, but it's not restricted to that specifically. It's
No.
pretty much the same changes, but everything's backwards for when you lift things as well. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is what. So yeah, let's start on. Aside from your ride height, what does lowering a car change?
Well, I think we'd start with like all factory cars have bump steer.
Correct.
Everything that you can buy has bump toe out because it's safer for the general public. So the suspension compresses on one side or the other, in a corner, and that wheel toes out a little bit, so the car doesn't feel twitchy, kind of settles into the corner. It's a lot more predictable for your average person.
Yep.
But-
Gotta stop already. We're already getting ahead of ourselves.
What?
Bump steer.
Bump steer. Bump steer.
What is it?
It's basically everything is going to have bump toe out, but that's so the lower you go, the more the front wheels toe out, and then if you go up from where stock is, they're going to toe back in.
Right, and that happens because of the tie rod angle.
Yeah,
Right,
the height
because-
of the relation between your suspension pivot points from the control arm and your tie rod pivot points from inner and outer tie rod, where those are in relation to each other changes how your bump steer is.
Right. So you're saying that it changes whenever that suspension is compressed, correct?
yeah,
So
as it
Compressed or
it
extended.
goes the opposite way. Extended,
well,
right?
yeah.
So,
Okay.
So you have to consider all of the pivot points
good
of
example,
everything on the suspension.
I guess in my eyes, so like trophy trucks, whenever you watch them,
Ooh, they spend a lot of time trying to get rid of bump steer.
yeah, but you can still see it.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever you're watching,
It's
them over
impossible to
jumps.
get rid of
Yeah,
altogether.
especially with that much suspension travel. But that's just to put it in a viewer's kind of mind that whenever you're watching a trophy truck go over jumps like that or whoops or whatever, you can kind of.
It's a little more visible.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that if anyone's lowered their car, before you get in alignment, you look like the front wheels are towed out a mile.
Oh yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast.
Yep.
And as that's a curve, it's not like, you lower it so much and you get so much toe out. Like the more you go lower, the more drastic the toe out is. And it can get really aggressive once things start inverting. And
not to say that everything's not like optimized exactly for the best case scenario to reduce bump steer from the factory.
Yeah.
it's,
Right.
well,
It affects some
it's not
things
to reduce
more.
it. No, it is not optimized to have no bump steer factory. But it is optimized for that ride height.
Right.
So everything's designed to be at the height they came with, and that's supposed to be the best compromise between drivability and comfort. So, bump steer.
So when you lower
So yeah, I
your
feel like we
car
haven't
or
painted
raise
Well,
your car, what happens, right? You raise it, and effectively, if you change nothing else, your control arms now point downwards.
Right.
And the upright gets closer to the steering box or the steering mechanism.
Yep.
Well, I guess that depends on.
See?
Well,
that
everything
depends.
everything goes from a down angle to an up angle
Well,
or a level angle. It goes from.
Not necessarily.
No one can see your hand motions, Dave.
I know.
I know this is difficult with just words, right?
just
It
words.
So
is.
you have to consider, don't worry about saying, yeah, you raise something 2 inches and this changes by X amount. It doesn't
No.
really matter.
Yeah.
The point is if you take like a cross section of the front end of a car and look
Yeah.
at where every single bushing in the front suspension pivots at, right?
Right.
Like the inner tie rod, the lower control arm, the upper control arm. They're all in different locations. Like if you're looking at the front of a car,
Right.
they're all not on the same vertical axis, right? So because of that, when you change suspension, whether it be because of raising or lowering, or because of suspension compression, each of those arms moves at a different ratio.
Yeah, the pivot points become different.
Well, they're never going to be in a vertical axis. It's
That's
not
what I'm
that
saying,
it's-
they aren't.
Well, yeah, but even if they were, it still wouldn't work that way. It depends on where the length of them, how far those points are apart from each other.
Yeah.
So outer ball joint and inner ball joint, and outer tie rod and inner tie rod, they can be a foot away from each other to the left, and it would still work out right. So you know what I mean? Like they're never going to line up vertically to get it to not work. It doesn't work that way.
I know, but I'm just saying
It's-
in terms of a visual reference, I was trying to make it simple here, but
It's more complicated than that. I like your
Let's
oversimplification, but
simplify it as much as your control arms that like constrain where your wheel can travel are no longer in the position they were designed to be in your original setup. Whether it's, closer or further away or at a different angle or whatever it is, it's not the same anymore. You've lowered or you've raised your vehicle, you've changed how its like default position is, and things don't act the way they're supposed to anymore.
Right.
right. And that's what causes both bump steer and then roll center issues is the next big one.
Right.
So
What is that?
roll center is how
Do you
I
remember
did
the
a big
definition?
thing. It's
the
how
point at which the suspension forces react.
to the vehicle body.
Yes.
So it's how the cornering forces going through the tire affect the way the body of the vehicle moves. So at normal designed ride height, say your control arms are flat to the earth, you put side load on that. Your roll center is kind of dead nuts in the middle. You're not creating roll into the chassis with side load from a corner. You lower a car.
to like try and push on an arm, that
Right.
has it's perfect. Push on it perpendicular to the pivot point, right?
Right.
It doesn't really move the car up or down,
Yeah.
right? But if you push on something that's already angled one direction or another,
Yeah, it'll go up or down.
It'll push either the car up or push the car down.
Okay, that makes
Exactly.
sense.
And
Yeah.
that corner or that half of the car or front or rear.
Okay.
So if you ignore, like when you lower a car, you lower the roll center, which makes a car have a lot more body roll. You never notice it because you're making the suspension a lot stiffer if you're lowering it.
Right.
So you don't notice the fact that you're increasing the body roll dramatically.
Well, you're increasing the body roll forces.
The forces, yeah.
There's
You're
more
not,
reactive force because the springs are stiffer.
Right, exactly. So, the way the suspension acts onto the body creates more body roll, but the springs are counteracting that more towards the other side of it.
Right.
Because there's less movement allowed.
Well, the springs are stiffer, so it can't roll as hard.
right.
It's a
yeah.
roll center. So when there's body roll, it's a force. Basically, it turns into a rotational force about a certain point, right?
Right.
So essentially, the car is twisting about a point. There's that torque,
Right.
and that's what's body roll is,
Right.
right? So when you have flat control arms, you get less of that.
Okay.
Yeah, the cornering force isn't causing the body to start to roll about that axis. But when you raise or lower it, it does.
Okay.
This also takes into a pretty big consideration the center of mass for the whole vehicle
Yeah.
and where that is in relationship to the suspension geometry. We're not going to get. I don't think that we can't get into that.
Nor can
need-
you change it. That's the
nor
thing.
can you change it.
No, you can't.
And you really
Unless you move
diagrams
the
would be
engine.
So helpful for this, but yeah, it's like possible to get a roll center below the basically road.
Yeah, that's
which is-
if you really slam a car.
Yeah.
Is basically what happens. Your roll center is in this theoretical point below the surface of the road.
Yeah.
So think about kind of
It's
So, like,
wild to wrap
maybe-
your hand around, right?
I'm give me a minute. I'm having a difficult.
So
I'm,
say
I'm
the-
understanding.
The
but I'm-
further away the theoretical roll center is away from the center of mass of the car,
Right.
the more that force has an impact on the body roll.
Right. And that actually determines the body roll direction. So if you have a roll center that's above or below
So many things.
the center of mass, that
Yeah.
that determines whether or not it's like rolling in or out of a corner. Which
Yeah,
is,
theoretically, if you ignore, you can get the forces to be opposite, which in real life just causes it to bind and not do it. But you can get it. You could theoretically make the suspension geometry so that if you leaned into a corner to the one direction,
Yeah.
the car
would
lean in.
actually lean the other way.
Yeah.
As far as the suspension geometry is concerned, it would never actually do it.
Right.
Because the weight of everything would just
Pretty sure
cause the
formula
suspension
cars
to bind.
Can do it.
Weird.
No, you can't. Not without active stuff. It just binds and locks up. It just causes the springs to just. The geometry is binding, so you're not even putting load onto the springs. It's just locking up solid.
Yeah, because
and
it
won't go.
Yeah, because it doesn't allow for movement, so it has to go somewhere because
Exactly.
physics.
Physics.
Right, because physics.
Yeah.
That's physics.
Good reasoning.
When in doubt.
When in doubt, physics.
No, it makes sense now. That makes sense. Well, because I mean, if it doesn't have anywhere to move, it's going to move whatever it can, right?
So what impact does, again, I'm
Scene
throwing
points,
out-
Will.
No. We're so far beyond that. No, you acquired your scene points, and now we're dealing with the repercussions. Okay.
Oh.
So
The non-fun part.
with the scene points, what would you say are for not correcting roll center? What are like the obvious driver downsides, like the noticeable impact from that, right?
Usually, like in a McPherson car, it probably applies to most cars. I just have more experience there. Is like your camber gain curve is like pretty whacked out. So you try to get into a corner and you start losing camber that should be
That helps
providing
you,
a little more camber, so the tires getting it would normally kind of lay down and you get more surface area.
Yeah, you would get
harder
more
into a corner.
contact patch.
You start losing it once the roll center is too low.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a byproduct of the roll center as much as the camber curve.
Right.
But
And
that's
that
what you
combined
start to
with-
perceive.
Combined
Well, I
with
feel
bump
like
steer,
it all goes
just-
into one. It's all one entity.
It is.
I've played a lot. I've ruined a lot of bump steer stuff
Yeah.
just trying to get that right with my E34.
Yeah. Mine's pretty bad in the Miata right now, and it's just on the list of things to deal with.
See, I'll be
But-
honest with you. I couldn't tell you if it's bad in the Corrado or not.
If you drove something with really bad, you can tell going from something that's like normal to something that's messed up.
So the Mark IV was like pretty normal. It was low, but it was like normal-ish to drive. Like it wasn't all. It didn't have a camber added to it or anything like that.
I mean, most of these changes are going to be tolerable to most people.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's not going to be optimized.
Okay.
You know?
And if you drove the same thing with the geometry fixed, you'd be like, holy crap, this is way better.
You would. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so a lot of it, just when you're lowering a car, comes down to, okay, the coilovers are stiffer.
Right.
They have less travel. They have a higher spring rate. It's just going to feel like better as far as response goes.
Yeah, you get
know?
better driver to road response.
And it kind of masks all these things too, like Mike was saying. So I mean, when it's stiffer, obviously the suspension travels less than at that point. So the bad,
Physical
yeah,
body roll isn't present.
right, and the
but-
bad bump steer isn't as effective. You know,
Right.
You know, because you're not moving the suspension as far.
Right.
But it's
It's there.
there.
Huh. Interesting.
So yeah.
Most Dancy boys don't care.
No, but I mean, they should. They should
See,
care because you could
yeah.
have your Stancy car like actually still drive nice, and it's
Right.
not that hard to fix, depending on
It's
application.
really-
some
look into
some
this.
things are hard to
I mean,
fix, but
I wouldn't say the Corrado's slammed. I mean, it's low, but it still drives pretty well. And
if you had
it's
like ball
nice.
joint extenders and like a tie rod flip kit, though, it would drive way nicer.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. So you're getting into solutions now.
Right.
Right.
So yeah,
So-
exactly. That's it's complex to kind of for what's.
So solution for roll center is control arms. So
We have to move both.
right,
regardless,
but and then like in general, that's the solution for that, and then tie rods is the solution for bump steer or the rack itself.
Right. Whatever you
So
can
wait,
move.
before we go on to solutions on how to fix your lowered car,
Well,
what,
yeah, we didn't.
what are the effects of a lifted car? You probably know better than I do. Then I've never really been in the off-road world, and I don't know like what happens when people put a 20-inch lift on their yee boy truck. Like
Well, yeah, it depends on the geometry, but like
Depends on the type of lift.
with their
Oh yeah. I guess we could kind of loop that in here real quick because
Things
there's different types of.
So we got
lifts.
like what 3 different kinds of lifts.
Right,
Really.
there's body
right?
lift, there's suspension lift, and then there's
Body lift affects nothing other than feeling like you're just
well rolls.
It's the worst kind of
center
lift.
of gravity, and it looks
center
dumb.
center of gravity, and it's really stupid. Yeah.
Don't do it.
yeah, don't do it.
You just show off your frame to everybody. It looks
but you can
awful.
put big tires on it.
So the body lift does affect suspension in a way that your center of gravity is so much higher now than your roll center, so the roll center has more effect on the body.
Because you're using the same. Well, yeah.
The
no, that
center
makes
mass
sense.
is more active upon
Because
Exactly.
you're taking
or
something
reacted
that
upon.
was here,
Yeah.
and you're keeping the same suspension and then putting it
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Which
you just have more leverage on
it's
everything,
not-
right?
yeah.
And you have
So-
no more
That's essentially
travel.
what it is,
It's
yeah.
no better than it was before. You can just
Mike Day is
You have no
Mike
more
Day is
clearance.
severely
You have-
against
yeah,
body
I
lifts.
hate it. It looks just
Oh, it's not
stupid.
good.
You can tell. Like
Yeah.
you can just tell instantly looking.
Now,
at
if you
something.
do like a 3-inch body lift with like a 6-inch suspension lift, it's like a little less
there
bad,
should
but it's
be
still
no body
bad.
lift ever.
if you can do like a body drop with a suspension
Ooh.
lift,
Okay, okay,
that would-
okay.
That's like, like some
All
hydros.
lifting's bad. So as someone
Well,
who's in the
hold on.
off-road thing, all lifts, you want to keep everything as low as you can. That's the thing. Center of gravity is the biggest difference there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if you're putting something on 40s, you try to get it as low as you can. Whatever is like the most in the way and you're not interested in like moving anymore, if you can get it so that that's full compression,
Yeah.
that's the way to go. Your vehicle will work way better. But getting back on topic, when you lift things, like a pretty good example of that, and there's a pretty good picture.
Well, hang
of,
on, can we finish the 3 different types of lifts? Body lift, stupid.
We just tell them what
There's
it is.
so
we don't
many
have to
types
go.
of lifts.
Suspension lift
frame?
and no frame is body.
Tires?
Right?
Well, that
No, it
kinda
would be like,
happens, but
well, like
yeah, where's
And then I
number
was going to
3?
say control arm long travel, but
That's the same. That's
It's not-
suspension.
okay, I'm saying stock suspension. Like
Just cranking it up.
I put hockey pucks on my struts.
No, like
to make
spacers.
my car higher.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
suspension, not body.
none of your geometry is changing. You're just moving, getting the suspension to droop out more. Like none of your
Changes
mounting
bump steer
locations
still.
are changing. No, none of your mounting. You're not modifying any of where your control arms mount or the spindles or anything.
It's just longer.
You're just putting bigger springs in, essentially.
Oh.
Whether it's a spacer or not, is what you're saying.
if you put a spacer in your front
Oh.
suspension,
Wait, what part of the front?
Yeah,
suspension?
that's
Oh,
that's
hold
the
on.
worst statement ever.
Yeah, because
You put a spacer in the barn.
upper strut mount.
Yeah.
1-inch upper strut mount spacer.
Yeah, that's common
Okay.
on Mark IVs. If you
Right.
okay, this is
You're
a good
changing
example.
your
bringing
lower
Mark IVs
control
into
arm
it.
No,
angle.
'cause
You're
it's a good
changing bump
example.
steer.
None
You're
of
changing roll
none of
center.
the pivots have moved.
Correct.
Right. So you
But you're
basically
changing your.
You're changing
angles-
nothing.
Yes, you. Okay.
it's the same curve you had stock at a different height. None of the geometry has changed.
All right. Well, I'll let you think about that a little bit longer.
I've done this.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
I'm doing this now.
Okay. I know you are.
Where's those sound effects?
Wait,
Matt, add some sound
yeah,
effects.
let's clarify this. So the hockey puck goes between the top of the
So
strut.
you're telling me so
And the
that
body.
if you had a control arm that was level to the ground and you put in a 1-inch spacer on your upper strut mount, that your control arm angle isn't changing relative
That's
to the
not
ground.
what I'm saying. You're
Okay.
still ignoring
Well, that's
it.
changing stuff.
Yeah, but you've changed none of the suspension geometry
No,
on
you're
the
just
car.
lifting the car higher.
None
right?
of the points have changed.
Correct.
Your stock camber gain curve is still the same. Your roll center points are all now at a different neutral point, but it's the same as if you just put a jack under the front of the car.
Yeah, but that's still you're still changing like bump steer. It's happening at a different
The
point.
curve
Suspension
is
travel.
exactly the same as it was. You're just at a different droop point.
Yes.
Yes,
I agree with
I agree with that also, but it's changing how the car.
I'm
handles.
trying to because you
You said,
came
wait,
up
you
with
said this is a
three
different kind of lift.
Yeah, you came up with 3 different kinds of lift, and there's not. That's the thing. You either fix the front suspension geometry, you make it taller without doing it, or body lift that's not real.
Or tires.
The tires change things too, but that's also not affecting suspension geometry.
It's a lift.
It's a lift. It
It's a way
makes
to
it
lift.
taller.
That's number 3 on my list.
Okay.
Agree.
That's what I was trying to figure out, where you came up with 2 different versions of lift for suspension, because it's you fix the geometry or you don't. You know what I mean? It's a different characteristic. You've got longer control arms or something, or it's
Right.
the stock control arms.
Right.
Yeah.
And the stock full geometry curve, just in a different place.
Right, and that's what I said. What this was the third was the long travel control arms.
Right.
So that's where I'm at.
Okay. It's a whole roundabout way to go back to where we were.
Okay.
You're the one asking
so
questions.
What
I was
happens
just
when you
making a
lift
statement.
things? You said
When-
there was a good example of it somewhere.
So there's a good example of when I autocrossed my E30 rally car. They got a good picture of it that they still occasionally use, where it's like coming around the front corner and it's like hanging a front tire, and it's because you can see the control arms drooped out. So you can see how with the control arms pointed downwards on the outside where the wheels are, any forces on the tire are pushing the front of the car up. Mm-hmm. So you can see where the tire is touching back down, and it's causing body roll because it's pushing up on the under the front corner of the car.
Okay.
This has been a big thing with like solid axle stuff with the panhard bar that locates it. A bunch of the Ultra 4 guys figured out that they'd roll coming off a ledge, like when the suspension's fully drooped out, they'd roll to one side for what seemed like no reason. Like they could hit the same corner to the left and it'd be fine. You hit it to the right and the thing would flop over upside down. And it's because the panhard bar is drooped out so much, it pushes up on the corner of the chassis and flips it over. So you're getting more reactive force from that to cause body roll, and it can do some things that freak you out.
Huh. Interesting.
So yeah, instead of it wanting to compress because the
Yeah,
control
Yeah,
arm's drooped out enough, it
there's
pushes
nothing
up
to
harder.
there's nothing to compress besides.
Well, you get the compressor spring, but you're separating that force between both the spring
Right.
and the control arm. Instead of if it were flat, it's going more towards the spring.
Yeah.
So you're getting more reactive force to.
It's just pushing it essentially.
Yeah.
Just pushing it in the opposite direction
It's
of
like
where
there's a
you're
guy
going.
above your A pillar kind of pushing it over.
Yeah, if you had a drooped out control arm that was loose in theory, and you were able to, you just had like a go-kart frame or something, and you pushed on the wheel, what would happen?
Would go
If
up.
you like pushed on both the front wheels inwards, the chassis would move up, right? Because the control arm wants to
Yeah.
They want to
Travel
stand
on
up
a-
vertically.
Yeah.
on a circle. So
Right. Because there needs room to compress and decompress.
sure.
Well, yeah,
Well,
but
no,
it's
I mean-
the force regardless.
Yeah.
It's you being pushing on the side of it is the same as a cornering force.
Right.
Just you're watching it happen static.
Right. That makes sense.
Some
So,
brain
I don't
melting, brain melting stuff here.
It's hard to word this stuff.
there's
Very-
It really is.
so many things going on. There's like, you think about angles that control arms are mounted at, like they're not flat ever.
No, never.
Like the axis, the kingpin axis.
Kingpin inclination.
Whatever your A arm or
Yeah.
strut or your control arm mounting points, if they're on an angle relative to the ground, front to rear or left to right also,
Yeah.
like
So your camber caster and then scrub.
you can
and-
put these pivot points in so many different places, and
Scrub
they
radius.
they change how they react in so many different ways.
Right.
I mean, that's
So
what-
there's also, I guess, something good to talk about is the different typical suspension layouts, right? So you have McPherson's strut,
Right.
where the strut is connected to a shock tower or the body.
The strut
And-
is what's controlling the wheel lean both
Camber
fore and
caster,
aft
yeah.
and left and right.
Right.
So and
So
you have
that's
one
basically where you're, to put this in simple terms,
No upper control arm.
Your coil over, or whatever it is, connects into a sleeve on the upright or the hub
Or bolts to it, yeah. But yeah.
or bolts to it, whatever it is. So like you're pretty much rotating around the axis of
the strut.
the strut,
Yeah.
and then you have a lower control arm that's in some form of an L shape, usually
Mm-hmm.
with a ball
Right.
joint.
It could also be a
It could be
multi-link.
multi-link. That's
That's true.
BMW's done their
So-
multi-link, and that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Well, what? Audi is multi-link, is it not?
Yes.
Okay.
So that gives you.
Well, most Audis.
So okay, there's a
do we
McPherson.
want to talk about that? The multi-link and what
There's-
it does.
You don't really, for the purposes of understanding how suspension works, you don't really need to know much about multi-link other than it's designed to
It eliminates
actively
scrub.
change and
It's like
suspension
wheel
height
scrub
changes.
radius is what it
What is that?
alters.
What is wheel scrub?
So if
radius?
you think about it, you have a zero offset wheel
Right.
versus a flat face wheel.
Think of the
Okay.
extremes.
Yeah, the
in my
extremes.
opinion, it's easiest to always think about the extremes. So, if you had a wheel that spun on a vertical axis and you just like turned it, that's like zero scrub radius. It's spinning on a flat.
on its own footprint.
Right.
'Cause Not everyone
in the
can see
center
your
of
hand
its
right
own.
now.
It's in the center of its own footprint. That's a good way to put it.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, if you put 15 feet worth of spacers on this thing and you turn the wheel,
Yeah.
what's the scrub radius now?
Yeah,
It's
it's
way out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So the
So
wheel
when
has
you
to
add-
roll.
It's described as the steering inclination angle, and it's where it connects with this tire
Contact patch.
patch. The center of the tire contact patch.
Oh yeah, because it's more or less depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, you'll never get less, but it's always
Yeah.
more or centered.
Right.
Right. So
Well,
that's
because it moves the entire.
the inherent issue. People always argue, say, hey, when you put a spacer on your car or whatever, oh, you're ruining the scrub radius or whatever because
I've
now
never heard that in
you're
my life.
moving the tire contact patch further away from the steering inclination angle. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Where it's trying to rotate.
Well, you're
around.
just you're adding
Hence-
length
hence
to
the
it,
term
which
scrub.
means overall,
Yeah.
it's going to be, if you have a wheel here and it's really close, then it's going to turn normally. But if it's all the way out here, then it's going to be
And it travels fore and
Right.
aft in the wheel well,
Yeah.
the more you space it out.
right.
But it
Makes
also, while it's spaced out more, has more of an effect on the road feel through the wheel. So, like a bump you hit on the side is going to try to yank the wheel towards that side.
Oh yeah,
You know what I
'cause
mean? Or the
there's-
crown in
There's
the
more
road.
for it to essentially pull, I guess.
Right. And that happens
it
with the
has
crown in the
leverage,
road.
whereas
Yeah.
it wouldn't with 0 scrub radius.
Right.
So, yeah.
So generally,
Interesting.
like front-wheel drive cars will try to have 0 scrub radius, so that way on and off throttle and on the brakes versus on the throttle doesn't try to yank the steering wheel out of your hand much, because that point's centered in the contact patch.
Right.
You're not getting a ton of torque steer, essentially.
Right.
The more you put spacer on, the worse your torque steer is going to get.
Yeah, because there's more.
It has
more
more leverage.
travel. Yeah.
Well, it has
more
more
leverage
leverage.
and more. Yeah.
Right. Think of it as a longer pry bar that
Yeah.
those forces are trying to turn the steering wheel out of your hands.
Now,
Yep.
I'm not saying I'm an advocate for spacer or no spacer, because I think there are inherent advantages
I
of
think it
running
really depends
spacers,
on
the
your
track
wheel
width,
tire fitment.
things like that. So, I mean, I'm not going to go either way on that one, but
No. But
I think
There's
it
a
was
certain
worth- it was worth
point
mentioning.
where like
yeah.
it stops making sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, it affects things differently too.
Right,
So
front
like,
versus rear too. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, depending on
You're not
on
scrubbing on the rear.
but yeah, it does change stuff there. Yeah,
right. So I'm saying, yeah, just because maybe you shouldn't put spacer on the front doesn't mean that you can't put it on the rear either. Because I mean, it may or may not have an effect depending on what geometry you have in the rear either.
Yeah, and some people might be running 4 inches of spacer on their car, and it's fine.
That's right. I'm literally looking at the drift car and thinking about how much
I know.
space. That's
I
what
was
made me
thinking
think of
about
that.
that as
I was
well.
going to
Yeah.
ask you, what do you have on there total?
We heard you
think
like
I think
adapters,
it's
so we
90
I think
bolted
it's
millimeters.
close to 4
Yeah.
inches.
Holy smokes!
bolted some adapters to your adapters because you
I'm
like
at 3, I
adapters.
think.
I was going to say, can you see the rotors yet?
I could do brakes on mine.
From the back of the
Yeah.
car. Yeah.
Just about.
Yeah.
I can 100% do brakes without pulling the wheels. But so another interesting point related to drift cars and scrub radius is it changes the way your caster feels. So caster is your steering feedback, because that's how far the steering axis is leaned, either upright or back. The more negative.
Negative.
I always forget that. I can
the,
never.
the plus minus
yeah.
gets me. But that's how the car returns to center. There's more caster, it returns harder to center.
All right, so the shopping cart wheel
Exactly,
analogy.
yeah.
Right?
Crazy carts.
But the more scrub radius you have, with more spacer, your wheel hanging out more, also increases that force, because that's a jacking force on the chassis. So if your wheel's hanging out even more, it's trying
Dave, you child.
jacking force. Yeah, I see.
Oh, it's so funny.
But that also
12.
makes
I'm
it
in a
even
mood today.
more try to recenter. So if you have 7 degrees of caster and this wild scrub radius that's way out there, it's going to rip the wheel out of your hands. Versus like you have probably, well, you don't have that much caster either, but a lot of people like S chassis stuff has a ton of caster for drifting. I have like 3 degrees of caster because I have a fairly high amount of scrub
I feel
radius.
like we should touch on this real quick
Ended
because
up
like a
about
lot of
5.
people might not know. So camber, caster, and toe. All right. Give them a quick explanation on what each one is real quick.
Probably should've
Everyone knows what
started here.
camber is.
Well, yes,
We
the
probably
anti-boy thing
should
is
have started
camber.
there. Honestly, this
Yeah.
is very.
Well, just throw it in there
Hey
real
Matt,
quick.
cut this. Put it at the beginning. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
No, don't do that.
Don't do that.
We're
So,
learning a lot here on
Yeah.
how to present this stuff.
Well, there's a lot that goes into it.
We're gonna
90% of
recap-
people
we'll
know what
recap
camber is
episode
because
2.
like they're like, oh look, camber gang.
Tilty
We know what
wheels.
that is.
Right.
Yeah. So like negative camber is more angle of the wheel.
Out.
Top of the wheel, closer in.
Yep.
Top in, bottom out.
Yeah.
All right. Caster. That is the angle in a McPherson strut situation.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's both the same.
Yeah. Okay. So it's your steering axis, basically.
Right.
The angle of your steering axis relative to a vertical plane.
Yeah.
So the more rearward your kingpin or your steering axis is,
So
more,
the top
higher
of-
the angle is.
Top to
basically.
bottom. So like where the bottom point is, and where the top point is more rearward on the car than
Right.
the lower point. That's a negative.
That's the
caster
shopping
angle.
cart. That's the wheel wants to go straight when you let go of the wheel situation.
Exactly.
This is like the other way of looking at scrub radius. So it's like a plane 90 degrees from that.
Yeah.
And how
Okay.
that is front to back.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, it's hard to say this in
Yeah.
words.
It is very difficult. Yeah.
It's easy to think about a McPherson strut because
Yeah.
when your coilover is angled back towards the driver, you have a bunch of
Right.
caster.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen if you ever seen a crazy cart, you know how they work. You know, you pull the lever to like either
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
make them into shopping cart wheels or drag them
Yeah.
and point the thing straight. That's what caster is.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
That's backwards, but yes.
Is that why they're
it's a
called?
backwards
Is that why
example.
they're called caster carts?
Yes.
Are
Called
they?
crazy carts.
Crazy
but they
carts.
have casters.
Maybe
yeah.
it's the knockoff version.
That's why
the-
it's called
the
caster.
cart.
That's why casters are called casters.
All right, Kevin.
Why is it called castor oil?
Castrol.
Wow,
Is that
different.
Adcaster?
Yeah. Let's try some.
Just dumps oil all over my car. Look at all that.
Heard I needed more castor.
Yeah.
So then toe is just the angle between
Both front wheels.
yeah,
or
relative
Both wheels, front
Right.
or rear.
relative angle between. Well, no, that's total toe. Total toe is the relative angle between the two wheels. Toe left and right is
Well, yeah, 'cause you
the
can toe in or toe out.
individual wheel what angle it is relative to being completely straight in the
With
direction
the
you're
body
going.
of the car, correct?
Right.
Or just
Yeah,
as
as if
straight
it's
down?
like turned
Well, yeah.
turned to the left or right.
You don't
Right,
really
yeah.
have any way of knowing.
The body of the car is never straight.
Hey,
Feet
by the
can never
way,
go
just
off
to
the-
let everybody know, this is why alignments are important.
So yeah, when you get in alignment, you have thrust angle, and so thrust angle is the difference between front and rear toe, essentially. It's not kind of you know, you could have the rears pointing off a little bit to the right, and the front's pointing off a little bit to the left, and then
Is
your
that
cross
why-
is all screwed
okay,
up, and it'll
so-
crab walk down the road. But
Is that why I see like a lot of
van the other day. That thing looked like it was doing like Tokyo Drift in a straight line. I'm like, what the hell?
every once in a
I
while,
see-
you see one of those, or
Holy-
like
yeah,
a truck
Yeah,
that
I
they
see
put the
trucks
rear
all the time,
axle in
and I'm
all
like,
wonky.
I can see the entire driver's side of your truck, but you're driving straight, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
They're in the lane in front of you, and the whole driver wheel is just
Makes
like
a little bit more
completely-
sense. Yeah, now I get it. Now I know why
Incredible.
it's like that.
Yep.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Their suspension geometry is all kinds of wonky.
So there we go. There we got toe, caster, camber.
Yeah, I feel like it was important to add that.
That was pretty important.
Yeah.
Where were we going before that?
We'll do a recap before we
I
get
don't know.
into episode
We're-
2. But
Sorry.
We were
We're
talking
talking about
caster
drifting
angle.
things and how spacers increase
Scrub.
Scrub radius.
Scrub radius
the-
makes it feel like it has more caster than it does.
Okay. And then we're-
And so will a wider wheel. It's kind of the same thing.
yeah, you can effectively
Spacers, wider wheel. It's
lower
the same
offset
effect.
or wider wheel.
yeah, I shouldn't
Putting
have
in-
restricted my comment to spacers only because
It's
It's
easier
not.
to
It
think
just
that
depends
way.
on wheel offset. Well, it's the fact it
No,
factors in all of them.
And the wheel offset, it's also dependent on wheel width.
True.
Right. Yeah. Your,
Well, yeah,
it's
because
where your
you're-
contact
because
It's
patch
the
is.
center
Yeah.
of the wheel.
Yeah, because you're creating with a larger wheel, you're creating a higher contact patch. Or
The
so-
center of the wheel relative to the steering axis,
Right.
which changes as it steers.
Right.
Dynamic.
Everything moves as everything else moves, which is why
So
steering stuff or like suspension stuff is so complicated.
the other thing
Yep.
is like you can look at all what should be the ideal geometry, and you can't do it. It's just from a packaging standpoint. If you want to do any of this,
Well, I feel like cars aren't necessarily they're engineered the best they can be, but
Yeah.
you're really
well, it's
not.
a
there's
series of
no-
compromises.
Yeah.
Well, it's like personal preference too. I mean, like what are you willing
I'm
to
talking.
compromise
I'm talking
with
like
this,
factory cars.
Right.
That
if
aren't.
you had like
yeah, but we don't care about factory cars.
dynamic length control arms, you could get.
It's like Ferrari throttle bodies. Like,
Ooh.
ooh,
I mean, you never know.
it could happen.
ECS world's first.
I mean, if they have solenoids that can activate valves fast enough,
doing
you could
like-
have solenoids that could
Oh
just.
boy, we're getting
like,
down a rabbit hole here.
We don't have
Well,
control
as-
arms anymore. We have linear actuators. For each one.
I don't like this, Rick.
That's if you start looking at like you brought up trophy trucks earlier
Yeah.
and bump steer, the wild stuff they do to avoid bump steer for things like that because you have 2 feet of travel at least in the front.
Yeah, you have
almost 3, but the very very bitter ends of your travel, both up and down, are going to be kind of garbage.
Yeah.
That's you're trying to minimize it as much as you can, but at the ragged edge of full droop and full compression, you're going to have bumps.
to. Yeah, it's not going to be good because
they-
there has to be a middle
So-
ground on especially stuff like that. Because if you don't have a middle ground, if it's one extreme or the other, then it's going to suck the whole time. You might as well make it suck the least amount.
Isn't going to like long travel control arms kind of like helping that in a way too?
You get more
because you
travel
get
without affecting the geometry.
the ratio between
Yeah.
your lower and upper control arms and the change in camber, which also changes steering angle.
The trouble is your steering geometry when you get that far wild.
Right, when
So
it
then,
makes it that extreme. Yeah.
that's why you see, like, have you ever seen the Ford trophy trucks with the twin traction beams?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no upper or lower control arm. It's a beam. They mount on opposite sides. So, like, the driver's side one will mount to the passenger side frame rail, and the passenger side one will mount to the driver's side frame rail. So it's like it looks like scissors.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And then you can't adjust camber
So you have
or anything.
essentially super long control arms. is
Super
the
long,
idea.
but because they have this like pivot axis, you have to do wild stuff with the tie rods. So they come up with this. They call it swing set steering, because you have this
Okay.
whole separate beam that has to swing with it.
Yeah.
So that you don't wind up with some wild bump steer. It's the only way to kind of combat that. So your tie rods also have to cross like the control arms essentially to get it right.
You'd almost need like
It-
a
yeah, it's
telescope
like
if you didn't have like. So essentially, the
That's
the
literally
steering
how
box.
my truck is set up right now. The stock.
Yeah, it's
F250.
based on
Yeah.
that stuff, but
Yeah.
it gets pretty wild when you try to go a ton
Right,
of
with
travel.
the travel. Yeah.
So essentially, the steering rack or box has to move because it needs to move left to right as things.
Ooh, you want to get more complicated?
No. So
Well,
what they
that's
do
what you're
is they
saying.
only move one wheel, and that drives this other wheel. So that way, when you have your steering linkage
Okay.
from the box is closer to the length of the control arm.
Well, so that's the thing. On a twin traction beam truck, you cannot run a steering rack. The
Right.
bump steer is worse
Oh,
because
yeah.
it telescopes.
Right.
Yeah,
So
you need telescoping
it
tie
needs-
rod, which is like a paradox.
right. So it needs to have a dynamic point like a steering box and
Yeah.
Pitman arm style linkage in order to minimize bump steer. So when you look at those like 3-foot travel trucks and you start just looking around underneath and it looks completely crazy,
Yeah.
there's a reason.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to solutions
So
for
if
lowered
you-
cars.
Right.
I was
I
going
know.
to say, so if you come into this
Don't
conversation
lower your
with just like absolutely oblivious to the fact that all these things change when you raise or lower your thing,
I mean, like,
we're sorry.
go like Google some like lowered suspension geometry and
Maybe
trophy
we
truck
can-
suspension geometry, and like it'll probably blow your mind like what is out there on the internet to show you.
I don't want to make any empty promises here, but maybe we can come up with some sort of graphic for our little
Yeah,
episode here.
we could definitely find something for that.
Yeah. We'll at least in YouTube, because that's easy, paste a link to some stuff.
Yep.
Right, Dave?
Yep. We can do that.
Okay.
You can do a couple pictures on Instagram. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's some good diagrams
Yeah.
out there.
Well,
Yeah.
the only so the
We'll try and post it on the day this drops and have it for reference.
The diagram that keeps it's not really a diagram, it's more of a meme than anything, is the regular car manufacturer's meme, and it has the picture of the control arm with the McPherson strut and then German engineering, and it's
Oh,
like
jeez.
all the
Yeah.
whole bits and pieces. That's
12
what's pop-
arms
yeah,
and
that's what's popping into
separate
my
springs
head.
and
Yep.
shocks and stuff. Yeah.
That'll become prevalent next week when we talk about the rear,
Yes.
Yeah.
because that's what gets into the million
Weird
arms.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
Everything's
solutions.
So anyway.
difficult.
Yeah, solutions.
Solutions to
Boy,
all of
we
these
haven't even
problems we made very complicated for you to listen to.
Yes.
So do you want to start with roll center correction, because that's something we did recently at work, and we have a solution for on your E30 46.
Yep, E30, E36, E46. So you basically want to, when you lower the front of the car, you want to get the control arm outer location where it's near the wheel back to where it used to live compared to the body of the car, that angle of the control arm. So we make a block and some spacers and have figured out all the geometry to lower it on the strut end of the things.
That's way easier. Yeah.
So to get the geometry back to where it should be,
So bottom of the upright,
yeah, bottom of the,
basically you're spacing out the location that the tie rod and the control arm mount to.
right.
Is this
So
the kit
you're
that we fit on Shane's
effectively
car?
Yes.
you're effectively bringing back the control arm. Like if you had lowered the car, the control arm would point up a little bit.
Yeah.
Now we're spacing out the outer end and we're bringing it back to where.
It
back
should
to
be.
close to level.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the goal.
Interesting.
And
yeah,
then
no,
at the
I
same
have
time, with that kit, we have the tie rod location, which is also has to be dropped in a similar amount to the control arm, because otherwise you're just creating more bump steer.
Mm-hmm.
But we also make it shimmable and have dialed it for we'll get to that in a second. But we made it shimmable so you can get rid of bump steer.
Right.
The reason it's not just a fixed location to fix your bump steer is because on a McPherson strut car, when you change caster, it changes toe and changes your bump steer location.
Yep.
So
In addition,
depending
though-
on your setting of caster is where it changes the angle of, the correlation between your control arm point and your tie rod point, in vertical space. So it's not a simple, like, this is your fix. Just, put your tie rod here. But it comes with a couple of shims so you can space it depending on how much caster you have.
Yeah. Or what your application you're using your car for.
That's
And how much you actually lowered your car.
True.
In
Right.
addition to all that. So
It's
it's
for all
not,
the
it's not a
things.
set
Yeah.
amount,
Yeah.
because if you only lowered a half inch versus 2 inches,
Yeah.
it's different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Okay.
not a simple, here's your
It also
full
has
fix.
adjustable.
So put that in general sense terms for someone that we don't have a kit for. So basically, you need to move the control arm back to the factory position
Side note.
using some sort of.
We need to drop product links here, because if
Yeah.
you want to see how it's fixed, we'll drop
it's
a
like
couple
putting the
solutions.
control
Yeah.
arm back in the position it was from the factory without changing the ride height of the
Yeah.
car.
Right. It's like
Makes sense.
lowering the car without lowering the suspension, kind of.
That kit also has adjustment for Ackerman.
Ooh, another can of worms.
Ooh, boy! All right,
Let's
before
leave that
we
one
get
out
into
of
that,
this.
let's leave that one out.
Let's leave that out for this one.
Let's do bump steer correction.
So yeah, that's the other thing is without fixing roll center, you can still fix your bump steer separately, and that's usually like Volkswagens have done it for a long time, or the older cars did, where you do a tie rod flip kit that was common on
Yep.
Mark 1s and 2s and
Yep,
stuff like that.
caddies and whatnot.
Because when you get to that ragged edge where your control arms are inverted and the car's significantly lower than it ever was to what they designed it for,
Yep.
you have to drop your tie rod location to get it similar to where your control arm is and get your bump steer back to normal. Your roll center still sucks, but it's going to drive a lot nicer with fixed bump steer than with nothing.
Right.
Boy, the amount some people lower those cars from where they used to be, I'm surprised like tie rods don't bind and like.
Well, you,
So
you
there's-
could have notched some cars.
So there's
for
two
that.
issues with that.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you lower a certain amount, doing the flip kit works, but just spacing it out usually doesn't work on the spindle side because it runs into the wheel. It's pretty far outboard in terms of everything.
No, it's the other way. Those tie rods mount from the top, so
Yep.
spacing it only makes your bump steer worse. So you have to.
So it's different on every car. It depends the front steer versus, well, it doesn't really depend on that actually.
It depends on where the
But-
tie rod mounts from.
But
if you have
top
to,
or bottom tie rod mounting. But still, sometimes tie rods already mount on the bottom, and top isn't just an option. And so in
yeah,
those
your
cases,
wheel-
it's like steering rack cars, you have rack spacers, which move the rack
Oh yeah.
relative.
Yep.
Well, it's very rare you get to move the rack because usually the oil pan's in the way. But that's not what like
Well-
E36 rack spacers do or any of that. That's a travel thing.
Well, I apologize to all the German things, but in my
It
experience,
depends
with-
where it depends how the steering rack is mounted.
right.
Right.
So you can
You can do
lower
it
the
on-
steering rack essentially is what.
Well, right. Like,
You
and
need
I
to
can
raise
tell
it.
you
Raise
that the steering rack,
Raise it.
Spacers.
the oil pan won't be in the way on like a front wheel drive car for most of them for the steering rack. I would assume. Just
I'm
Yeah,
honestly
there's
thinking
other
we've
stuff
talked
in the way,
we've talked
but-
about developing a kit for the Volkswagens now,
Yeah,
and
space
it would
the
make,
rack up.
That would make the most sense to space the rack up on those.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
agree.
Just because it's easy, and
Yeah.
it'll be relatively inexpensive. It's popular on Miatas because there is clearance.
You have a similar mounting style on the Miata too. It's kind of like
yeah,
a clamp.
it's front steer, but yeah, it's a clamp, and it's just there's room.
Yeah.
so
BMW
just a
didn't
real
give us
easy
that
solution
luxury.
for that, and it makes a huge difference in the feeling of everything.
I feel like I want to go home and like mess with all this stuff.
Go for it.
To it.
I'm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the crowd could probably use it. Being
It's
a,
one of those things you didn't know how bad it was till it's better.
Yeah, being,
Right, once you
being a
fix it, you're like,
nose heavy,
wow.
very nose heavy car.
You'll sign up for an autocross before you know it.
I did the one autocross.
It
It was
was
all right.
great.
It wasn't great. I mean, it was it wasn't bad, but
Yeah.
it could always be better.
So yeah, boy, aside from Ackerman, I feel like that's like a whole car.
That has like minimal effects on things unless you're drifting.
I mean, you
kind
can
of.
also talk about front steer versus rear steer. in that
It,
sense.
it doesn't change much. So front steer is if your tie rod is in front of the wheel center line. Rear steer is what we're considering with the tie rod in back of the wheel center
closer
line.
to the driver.
And that's just whatever the manufacturer chose, depending on the packaging constraints. So whether
Yeah.
the oil pan is in the way or the engine's in the way, you got something you were trying to avoid, so you can go one side or the other. Generally, front-wheel drive cars are rear steer because it puts the tie rods in tension under throttle. Just because that's a little more stable than putting them in compression. Compression makes things kind of a wet noodle.
Yeah.
Like you try to push on a piece of spaghetti, it's never going to work, but you can pull on it.
I like that analogy. It's a good
Yeah.
one.
Thanks.
It made a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, I thought you might.
Every once in a while, you get one that's like off the cuff, and you're like, damn.
Spaghetti.
Let me just
Yeah, that was a good one.
pat myself on the back there. Yeah.
The old spaghetti. But it doesn't work that way. Like S chassis Nissan stuff is also rear steer. BMW steering box stuff, rear steer. BMW steering rack stuff, front steer. So they're kind of all over
And
the
it's
place.
really all
It's
just
all
where it's-
packaging constraints,
Yeah,
but
well-
it changes the way you have to think about it a little bit. It changes things more for drift angle stuff than it does for geometry for lowering, but
Yeah.
it just does limit your options on how
So
you
what
do
would
things.
be better for drifting? I feel like it would be. I don't actually know.
front steer?
That's a question more so of rack or box, and one of those is significantly
I feel
better.
I don't want to get
Yeah.
into this right now.
But that's
Get to the
irrelevant.
point.
Yeah.
Front steer opens up more options for steering angle stuff a little easier. Rear steer kind
Yeah,
of
you can add
pigeonholes you a
more
little bit.
steering or.
As a guy with a rear steer car he built, probably could have went to a front steer setup had I thought about it, but instead, here I am.
I mean, it works pretty good.
It works good now. Took some tweaking.
But you
Well,
also-
when you're using a rear steer rack, I mean, it just.
You also
know,
bent a tie rod the other day, so.
well, that's from going off track.
Yeah, I
What do you
slid off the
expect?
track.
Well, just not hitting anything. Just
I scooped up an astronomical amount
Okay.
of dirt.
Did you see
Well,
the inside of
so-
his wheel?
Yeah,
Oh, that's the
He
one that
did some
broke.
digging.
I mean,
He did some digging.
I'm not mad about that one.
Okay.
But
Yeah, that's tie rods they're pretty cheap.
now I
so,
have 4 spares I keep in the
there you
trailer.
go.
But
Yeah.
So bump steer now.
We just did that.
we just talked about it.
Okay.
Bump
We could
steer,
do-
yeah. You can
could do
flip the
spindle
tie
side.
rod. If essentially you need to fix its relation to the control arm. So depending on which side it's on, you might have to flip it from one side of where the mounting location is to the other, or you can just shim it down. That's application dependent, but
In the case of our Turner parts, it also increases. Well, it moves the position of the tie rod on the spindle closer to the axis of the steering. So
right.
that
That's how we're
gives
getting
you
more steering
quicker
angle.
steering.
Yeah, quicker.
And more angle.
Yeah, quicker.
So
more
essentially
angle.
less steering input for more wheel turning, but that's also going to put more force in the tie rod.
Correct.
Everything's a compromise.
Yep.
Exactly.
Can't just lower your car and get away with it.
Nope.
It depends if you care about driving
Well, right,
quality
exactly.
or not.
We care, and that's the only
We
reason
care.
you should be listening.
You can have both.
Yeah.
You know, you could have your
You
stance
just
your
have
pants
to
car
try-
that drives nice, or
try
you
a little
can
bit.
lower it and have it still handled correctly.
It usually
You
involves
have your cake.
And eat
things
it.
that most people don't do, like modifying control arms or buying custom control arms or changing. I guess there's really not a market for
So
like Volkswagen, things to fix this stuff.
There is
There's
on the
not.
old cars.
So there,
Not on the new cars.
Having the Corrado and it being like a combination Mark II, Mark III, Passat, whatever the hell they wanted to do with all the parts that they had left in the bins. There is some like suspension stuff because like obviously most of those early cars have rear beams, right? And there is no toe adjustment. You have to buy like a camber plate or a camber shim or stuff like that to do camber adjustment and stuff like that. But there is no other adjustment because it's a solid beam and you can't. That's it. That's what you get. What you get.
My buddy that's
Yeah.
had Mark IIs forever has ball joint spacers.
Yeah.
There's a company that made those so you could space to fix your roll center, space the outer ball joint down.
I might
And
have
then,
to ask your buddy where he got those.
Yeah, then also a tie rod flip kit to fix the bump steer at the same time.
Yep.
And there were companies back in the day for those older chassis that were fixed.
Yeah.
And
And
we
you can
are
still find-
looking into fixing those now
Talk
is
about
why
rear
this
beams
is
next
relevant.
Yeah. But
So
Rear beams we'll discuss next
Yeah,
week.
well,
hey
rears-
man, I'm not a fan of rear beams anyways. I just own Volkswagens that have
Yeah,
them.
there should be axles and stuff back there.
There should
Why would you have
that's the
all
only
that
place there should be
space?
axles, really.
All right. All
They
right.
put them in the wrong place.
On that note,
Yeah. On that note,
Hopefully this wasn't too confusing.
What else?
We're-
I think we learned some lessons on how to try
I
and
learned-
explain this stuff. So
yeah, I mean,
hopefully
that's-
round 2 at the rear will be a little more coherent.
Yes.
coherent.
We'll drop some
Yeah.
links.
I will
to
say-
some.
Uh-oh.
Just as one more like note,
Kevin's
something
gonna say.
I've just kind of like noticed about some of the, at least the IRP kit on my car,
Mhm.
is that the car is significantly lower than it was before. But what they've done with that control arm has made it sit very flat
Yeah.
relative to what the factory control arm was doing. So a lot of these aftermarket companies are like taking this into consideration. You know, you buy like a angle kit for your whatever car, it's usually pretty well optimized to be.
Depends on the
Not-
company, but yes.
They're not just recreating like a factory control arm and like making it longer.
Right.
Yeah, don't do that because the guy who's buying it probably not putting it on a bone stock car.
Right. I don't know. It's something I noticed just kind of recently, just like looking through the fender. It's like, oh, wow, they really thought about that, and the kit works really well. So that's probably part of the reason it does, because it's
Shout out to IRP for actually putting some real thought into their kit,
yeah,
Yeah.
which is good because there's probably a handful of companies that don't
I
do
mean,
that.
we were at this drift event on Sunday, and I was behind some guy in his S13, and
Oh,
his control arms looked like they were like pointing at the sun. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Where are they going? Like
The guy with no bumper.
Yeah.
And the skinny rear tires.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember seeing that too, because like all his rear suspension stuff was like pointed at the moon. It was unbelievable. I've never seen it.
It's like
damn
like,
near
the
vertical
car's
like
not
that.
that low. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, but his subframe was pretty low, so it was like really weirded out.
Subframe spacers?
Yeah, I don't know. He must have spaced it all down to ruin the geometry more. Like it was wild.
Maybe you
ruin
get to
it
a certain point,
more.
it's so bad that it's good.
If you just
Just
No-
maybe.
no
I don't
point
know.
of return.
take all
Your
the
springs are
out,
too stiff, so you just make bad roll center.
you turn it into a go-kart where you just lock everything out.
Yeah.
There you go. Solid everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, with control arms pointed at each other.
Yeah.
It was
Gross.
noticeable, at least.
Yeah.
How do you drift though?
How he do?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't keep tabs. There was 90 people there.
Holy Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's
that's
a lot of cars.
That's a lot.
90 cars, not 90 people.
That's still a lot.
That's worse.
Yeah, that's worse.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, on that note, we'll talk about rear suspension and miscellaneous things that all come with that next week.
We'll do our best to post some supplementary
Some-
diagrams, articles,
Some
products.
informational
Yeah,
things.
to
Yeah, we'll try to
Help.
work on our terms a little bit better next
Post
time.
we'll post the diagram that's on that whiteboard that's been at
it's
work
still
for
there,
like
yeah.
yeah.
3 years.
Yeah, I did a video on our roll center kit, so
Oh, I'll post that link.
we can
Perfect.
post that link.
Perfect.
That's
Yeah, there we go.
perfect.
Actually,
But-
we'll just post the video.
Ooh. Mike and his little Turner shirt.
IGTV.
Yeah. You don't usually get to see him in a polo, so this should be like pay-per-view kind of thing, honestly.
That's
but-
IGTV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
But yeah, on that note, make sure to follow us at CAD to Cars and listen to us on our 2 larger platforms, iTunes and Spotify. There's a handful of other ones, but you'll have to find those on your own.
Yeah.
Good
Leave us
luck.
a review too, you know.
Yeah, leave us a review, leave us comments, tell us what you want us to talk about, whether it's engineering stuff or just miscellaneous car things in general.
Yeah, do that. We haven't got any messages telling
yeah.
us we suck lately,
Well,
so
come on, guys.
let's
yeah,
go.
step it up.
Yeah.
And that is it for today. See you guys next week.